I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for June the 5th, 2025. We have more news to go through today than we do theology, but the topic I have selected is something very important because we are entering into a rather interesting season as today's Messianic movement. We are only a few weeks out of the Messiah 2025 conference. This is a time when we interact with Messianic people from all over the world. We put our two fingers on the pulse of the Messianic movement, and we wonder about its future and about new developments or the lack thereof. And indeed, for someone like me with my religious background and theological training, considering the future, considering issues which are going to affect younger people is something very, very important. So I'd like to briefly delve into the topic of Adiaphora. This is a theological term I am sure some of you have encountered from time to time, but I'm also sure that many of you are completely unfamiliar with it. But Adiaphora is something we need to be keeping in mind more and more as we enter into the future. It is the year 2025. We are in the mid-2020s. And there are going to be things which today's Messianic community, which for whatever reason or series of reasons has decided to not talk about, put off to the side, even sweep under the rug, they're going to be things which we can't avoid any longer. Much of the isolationist mindset too many people have has got to disappear. And with that, there are going to be things we disagree about, or more likely, there are going to be things which many people are still working through. They knew they had to talk about it another day, and then, wouldn't you know it, that other day finally arrives. So what is the theological term adiaphora? Okay, so here we have my Bible software. This is Logos, and there are two theological dictionaries we're going to be looking at. The first is the Lexham Glossary of Theology. This comes loaded with Logos, I believe. Adiaphora, a term meaning indifferent things, which is used to refer to things that are non-essential to the faith. Let me read that again. Adiaphora, a term meaning indifferent things, which is used to refer to things that are non-essential to the faith. Now, what would we regard as being essential to the faith? Things like there is one God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the one God of Israel. There is Yeshua the Messiah, his son, who is the eternal uncreated Son of God. There's the Holy Scriptures, our final authority for our belief, our practice, and that salvation is by grace through faith and that human beings cannot earn his salvation. Those would be the kinds of things which would be core essential beliefs. There'd be some things which are adiaphora, which, while we all have strong opinions about them, they don't matter one way or the other in terms of having direct salvation involvement. So, for example, what do you think about the end times? Are you a pre-tribulationist? You believe in an any moment beam out to heaven before the time of Jacob's trouble, or are you more on the post-tribulational side? You believe that God has the power to supernaturally protect and preserve his people like he did the ancient Israelites in Egypt. While there's some very strong opinions and some very strongly held beliefs regarding something like that, it's ultimately adiaphora. It doesn't have a direct impact on your salvation. We can be brothers and sisters and get along and hold to different points of view. One issue which we don't encounter that much in today's Messianic community, but we will as we enter into the future: creation, evolution. Did God create Adam and Eve by divine fiat, or did God use the process of evolution to bring forth the human species? And the considerable majority of early Genesis 1 through 4, is to be looked at as poetry or prose. And a lot of evangelicalism, that is considered to be adiaphora. It doesn't have a direct bearing on one's salvation. It comes down to biblical reliability. And you're going to see more variety on those matters as we enter into the future. That is inevitable, especially as we engage more as a Messianic faith community with conservative and Reform Judaism, which overwhelmingly is going to advocate that God used some kind of divinely directed evolution. That is adiaphora. That does not have a direct bearing on where people spend eternity, even though some people think it does. There are many other things which would be regarded as adiaphora, especially when you get into, say, Torah application. Is it required for men to wear beards all the time? What about things like the tzitzits or the fringes? There are a lot of different ways these are approached in the Jewish tradition, and you see them approached differently in the Messianic community. And generally speaking, variety of approach, a plurality of views regarding halakha tends to be permitted. And that's okay. It should not be the center of our spiritual identity. Our spiritual identity should be focused around the completed work of Yeshua the Messiah on the tree of sacrifice. Okay, so we're going to go over to another theological definition of adiaphora. This is actually from a resource I have in print, but it's also in this Bible software, the Pocket Dictionary of Theological Terms. So here we have adiaphora: items of belief not essential to salvation. In Lutheran thought, the adiaphora were defined as practices of the church that were neither commanded nor forbidden in Scripture. In contemporary terms, adiaphora are those things not clearly addressed by Scripture that Christians may freely practice or believe with a clear conscience before God, and that do not affect salvation. Now, it is true, some people consider things to be salvation issues, which ultimately are not. They might be reliability of the Bible issues. They might be effectual issues. For example, one of the biggest controversies in evangelical theology over the past 50 to 60 years has been the ordination of women as pastors and females occupying positions of leadership. Now, the opinion I hold to is the egalitarian position that both men and women should be co-leaders of the home and co-leaders of the assembly. Who leads the family? The husband and the wife. Should you ideally see a congregational situation with both men and women as leaders? Yes. But guess what? Does it affect one's salvation? No. Can it affect the effectiveness of the outreach of the body of Messiah? Yes. Yet, my family has not been a part of any Messianic congregation for 30 years now where there has been a co-ed leadership, elders and deacons. And that's very different from the previous religious experiences we have had. But because we have been called and assigned by the Lord to the Messianic community, we have to learn to be flexible as it still develops and matures. So for us, that's a matter of Adiaphora. Others, while not considering it a salvation issue, have very strong opinions one way or the other. And we have to remember when we are in history. We are in the mid-2020s. We are a full 25% or so completed with the 21st century. We're going to see more and more complicated things as we enter into the future. For some reason or another, the Messianic community tends to be more behind the curve than Judaism and Christianity are on a number of these issues I've mentioned and many, many others. And we're going to have to grow up in some areas. And apologetics is here to defend the faith, to facilitate stability, but it's not always here to defend the status quo, because there are perspectives which we have to take into account, especially as it involves what younger people are talking about, what they are influenced by, and this common attitude we see of just putting issues off to the side for another day, and then when that other day comes, acting like it doesn't appear. That's not going to work for that much longer. So I thought it was important that we discuss Adiaphora, because on Messianic Insider, as a part of our ongoing conversation, we do discuss uncomfortable and inconvenient topics, which some of the older crowd purposefully did not want to see addressed. Can we wait any longer on some of these things? I think we're entering into a time where things are getting more and more complicated. Growing anti-Semitism, growing anti-Zionism, more and more people asking about, can I trust the Holy Scriptures? What do you do about this issue? And along with that, the impact of technology, which 20 years ago, certainly 30 years ago, was not having the impact it does today. So I hope you find some of our points on Adiaphora useful, especially as we contemplate what is going to be coming down the pike. All right, so our news roundup. And of course, we go through the news stories, whether they are contemporary or religious related, after the theology roundup, because most of them are time sensitive. All of the links I'm going to be going through will be available for you to look at when this episode is archived on MessianicApologetics.net. Okay. I've had to switch screens. All right, so we're going to talk about a number of these ongoing world matters. From Newsmax yesterday, June the 4th, President Trump said on Wednesday that he discussed the recent drone attacks by Ukraine on Russia in a telephone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And here the headline is, Trump, Putin vows retaliatory strike coming on Ukraine for nuke bombers hit. Yeah, this is very serious. Yesterday, we talked about what Charlie Kirk had to say. This is a very serious situation. Is it going to get to the point where there is some kind of atomic exchange? I don't think so. But is it going to get to the point where that is a significant threat at a Cuban Missile Crisis level? I think those are the factors we have to be considering here. Also from Instagram, yesterday from the New York Post, President Trump spoke by phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday, acknowledging afterward that it was not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace between Russia and Ukraine. Yeah, what's going to be taking place over the next week or so with the Russia-Ukraine situation? Also, yesterday, this is from Michael Haynes, who is a correspondent accredited with the Holy See, that's the Vatican. Pope Leo spoke with President Putin by phone yesterday. So the Vatican is trying to get involved with this. Full Vatican statement. During the phone call, in addition to matters of mutual interest, special attention was paid to the situation in Ukraine and peace. The Pope made an appeal for Russia to make a gesture that would promote peace, stress the importance of dialogue for the realization of positive contacts between the parties, and seek solutions to the conflict. Pope Leo referred to Patriarch Kirill, thanking him for the good wishes he received at the beginning of his pontificate, and emphasized how common Christian values can be a light to help seek peace, defend life, and seek genuine religious freedom. So yeah, this is something which it doesn't just affect Russia and Ukraine, it affects the entire world. All right, so to more domestic matters from the New York Post yesterday, President Trump directed his administration on Wednesday to investigate whether former President Joe Biden's aides conspired to deceive the public about his mental decline and used an auto pen to sign documents without his knowledge. So this is going to be something which factors into, what took place in the previous presidential administration. Now, President Trump did post on his Truth Social platform over the weekend the conspiracy theory claim that this wasn't Joe Biden, this was a mindless clone or series of clones, something like that. So what does that mean? What does that not mean? What we can be guaranteed is there are going to be some very intense discussions and speculations on the previous Biden administration, who is in charge. Was President Biden really at home in mind for certain? And it's just going to get more and more interesting for certain. Okay, from CBS News, also yesterday, President Trump said Wednesday that he spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin by phone for over an hour, and Putin told him that he plans to respond to Ukraine's drone strike on Russian air bases. Ukraine on Sunday launched a drone attack deep into Russian territory that security officials said destroyed about 40 military bombers. So yes, over the next few days, you can expect the rhetoric from the Russian government to increase. And yeah, Russia is going to respond to what Ukraine did with the drone strike in a significant way. That I would definitely be watching. Okay, I ran across this on my X, formerly Twitter feed. I thought this was interesting. This is from the channel Spiritual Abuse. If the leaders tell you that true freedom is found only in obedience to their commands, run. It's a cult. Frequently in apologetics, a cult is associated with a religious group which denies core biblical essentials. So, Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus Christ being God, the final authority of Holy Scripture. Does salvation come through grace, or is it something human beings can earn? Those are the classic things you look for as it involves a cult. And so, some of the classic cults which get called out are things like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Way International, the Moonies, things like that. But you can have religious groups which hold to classic small o orthodox theology, but because their leader or leaders are highly controlling, they require you to give so much money to them. Otherwise, God will withhold his blessing. They require you to rigidly adhere to their code of conduct, which goes well beyond just basic biblical ethics or morality. They are hyper controlling. They want to micromanage the lives of married couples. They want to make sure that there are no unmarried men or women in the congregation, that they get paired up, that the lives of those who are involved with them are under careful scrutiny. Those are the kinds of things people look for in a cult. And yes, there are a lot of non-denominational situations where there's not an accountability system beyond the local assembly that can devolve into this. Some of the scandals we have seen over the past year and a half or more, particularly from the charismatic movement, but not exclusively, they can be described as cultic in some way. A lot of the Hebrew roots movement, aside from some of its bad theology, can be described as being cultic because of the control of some of these local groups, which are not part of a denomination or larger series of accountability. So because of that, the leader or the leadership can basically get away with whatever it wants to. And in apologetics, we have the awesome responsibility to, as I like to describe it, as part of that ongoing conversation, to be transparent as best as we can and discuss very uncomfortable things. I'm glad for myself, I've never been in this kind of a situation, but all of us have to guard ourselves in whatever religious situation, whatever spiritual community we may find ourselves, because we live in very dark times. Things are going to get more and more complicated as we get closer to Yeshua's return. And we have to have the wisdom and discernment, and we have to appeal to the Lord, not only to protect us, but to give us the ability to have a witness of the Spirit with who the true brothers and sisters are. So I thought this was an important thing, and this is something we will definitely discuss again in the future. Okay, this is another thing which came across my X, or formerly Twitter feed, from Mandy. So it just appears to be an individual's channel, but this is important for us as Messianic people. Not every believer reaches lost people the same way, and that's okay. The Apostle Paul understood this deeply. He didn't compromise the gospel, but he adapted his approach to meet people where they were. Some people forget that. Different methods, same gospel, same Savior. We should extend grace to those using different tools to reach the lost, as long as the message remains Christ and Him crucified. And generally speaking, I think we can agree with that. Every one of us has a different sphere of influence. There are methods which work better for some and not so well for others. The platform the Lord has given us has been with podcasting, with producing books and publications. But it's this verse which, 1 Corinthians 9:20-22, this is something which can get a lot of Messianic people off guard. And without going into all of the details here, things like, to the Jews I became as a Jew, to those under the law I became as one under the law, to the weak I became weak. There are many contemporary Christians who believe that in his evangelistic efforts out in the Mediterranean basin, that the Apostle Paul was a proverbial chameleon, and he changed his behavior around different groups of people in order to best present the good news. And from that perspective, many people have drawn the conclusion that, was Paul being entirely honest in this approach? That is, of course, not the only way 1 Corinthians actually 9:19 through 23 can be approached. Some look at it from the perspective of Paul actually changing his behavior around different groups of people. So he would act like a Jew around Jews, and like a Greek or a Roman around Greeks and Romans. Others look at this from the perspective of this being a hypothetical statement of Paul putting himself into the position of different groups of people he would encounter in the Mediterranean basin, and these are ad hoc categories, in order to best communicate the good news to them. So when Paul said, to the Jews I became as a Jew, the Jewish experience of the first century, particularly of the diaspora, was something very complicated. And it wasn't just because of the exile and the people of Israel spread all over the known world, but also the continual threat of assimilation to pagan idolatry, to polytheism, wanting to get Jews to be sucked into Greco-Roman religion, Greco-Roman society, get them assimilated, get them to abandon their Torah heritage and the covenant. All of the things which had took place, especially since the Maccabean crisis of the mid-2nd century BCE. When Paul said, to the Jews I became as a Jew, it was his identification with a lot of things involving Jewish history, Jewish culture, the pressures against the first century Jewish community. And today, that would involve a lot of other things, not only the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, the diaspora, unfortunate complications, Jewish-Christian relations, persecution, Inquisition, the pogroms of the Russian Empire, but of course also the Holocaust, Zionism, the rebirth of the state of Israel. 1 Corinthians 9, 20-22 involves a lot of what I would consider to be hypothetical identification with an audience, putting oneself into the position of another in order to best communicate the good news. Not necessarily that your behavior would compromise the integrity of the good news. And indeed, in 2 Corinthians, Paul wrote that when he presented the good news, it was not with any kind of a pretense. He did it honestly and above board. So I have written in my notes that this is a good passage. I have written on it before, especially in our ministry's commentary on 1 Corinthians. This would be a really good analysis to go through for one of our longer episodes of Messianic Insider. Okay, so back to more contemporary news. This is from I-24 News. Drones flew over the Gaza-bound ship carrying Greta Thunberg and 11 others. Activists called it a psychological tactic to deter their mission, but it was later identified as a Greek Coast Guard surveillance drone. The ship continues on, expected to dock June 7th. It's not going to happen, but the thing about Greta Thunberg, and I'm probably not alone in that I consider her to be one of the most repulsive human beings I've ever encountered. Of course, she was at one point out there as a hyper-environmentalist. Humanity only has a few years left before we're going to have irreparably damaged the planet with global warming. And now she's totally switched gears and gone into the anti-Israel, pro-Hamas stance. And indeed, is it really about saving the planet, or is it really just about protesting what the latest in vogue thing is? Some of us are not fooled by Greta Thunberg. Okay, from the X channel breaking 911, Zelensky bombed Russia's airfields. Putin tells Trump he will respond. Zelensky proposes ceasefire. Now, what does this possibly tell us about what the whole drone attack by Ukraine? Was that just a last-ditch effort to do something? And this is the last thing that the Ukrainians can have before they sue for peace? This is a situation which continues to develop, and of course, new information continues to be uncovered. We just wait and see. I mean, this is a very serious situation, and while I have been praying for an honorable peace, I know it's not over, and I do believe things are going to be getting a little more tense before sanity prevails. Open source intel. This is from yesterday, the 4th of June. Guys, today's news marks a serious and significant development. Here's a quick recap. So this is on the Iranian situation. Number one, Trump made it clear we will not allow any enrichment of uranium. Number two, in response, Khamenei doubled down this morning, declaring that the U.S. cannot weaken Iran's nuclear program and stating flatly, Tehran will not abandon its uranium enrichment work. He added, today we're capable of producing nuclear fuel starting from the mine and all the way to the power plant. Number three, Mohammad Eslami, head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, reinforced the message. We will continue to enrich uranium in Iran with all our might, with strength and determination. So the conclusion is, in short, Iranian civilians would be wise to keep as far away as possible from any nuclear sites. So are we going to see a military showdown with Iran? Or is this just going to be, the rhetoric builds, and then finally, okay, we're going to have to resolve this peacefully, and we're going to have to make commitments which have us crawl back our nuclear aspirations. I hope everyone prays for peace. All right, to change this slightly, this is from the X channel Leading Report. It gained my attention because it deals with the state of Texas, where I live. Popular snacks such as Skittles, M&Ms, and Doritos, and soft drinks like Mountain Dew could soon be labeled not recommended for human consumption in Texas. The bill passed unanimously in the state Senate before being forwarded to that's Greg Abbott, the governor's desk on June the 1st, where it is under review. State lawmaker Representative Lacey Hull says HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. called her to voice his support for the bill. I can't remember the last time I had Doritos or Skittles. I have had peanut M&Ms this year. I haven't had Mountain Dew in such a long time. One of my favorite snacks, though, is Cheez-Its. I always keep a box on hand. When are we going to start seeing some of these food products labeled as not recommended for human consumption in a state like Texas? It's going to be interesting. We do know that there are a lot of unnecessary chemical additives to our food products, especially processed food products. So what kind of a world do we live in? Okay, this is something which came across my feed yesterday evening from the Christian Post, the Gateway situation. Robert Morris told Gateway elders he knew Cindy Clemenshire was 12 during abuse court filings. Read through this article. This is not a comfortable article to read through, but apparently the situation with Robert Morris was known by Gateway Church going back to the year 2011. Now, I know Gateway Church has now tapped on this gentleman, Daniel Floyd, to be their next senior pastor. He is going into a dumpster fire. And this is not going to end well. And unfortunately, the Gateway situation does intersect with today's Messianic Jewish movement. So read through this article yourself. It's not a comfortable read at all. It's not going to end up well. I thought this was very important from open source intel. This is from earlier today, June the 5th. How does Israel, a nation fighting genocidal terrorists who still hold hostages and would carry out another massacre in a heartbeat, get cast as the villain in the eyes of so much of the world? Israel evacuates and warns civilians before airstrikes. Israel's combatant to civilian death ratio is one of the lowest in modern urban warfare, nearly 1-to-1. Israel is now distributing the aid while under fire. Israel is fighting in a battlefield the enemy built beneath hospitals and schools. Israel is facing an enemy that deliberately places its own children in harm's way as a strategy of war. Even the Hezbollah terrorists didn't do this. Collateral damage is tragic, but war is not clean. What is clean is the line between civilization and barbarism, and somehow the world is blurring it. This is not the war Israel wanted, but it is a war it must win. Now, this is important to keep in mind. My take, if Israel wants to shift the narrative even slightly, it needs to master the PR game. And that is where you do see, especially online and with different celebrities and what have you, that is where the pendulum is tilted toward the side of Gaza, the side of Hamas, unfortunately. But war is bad, and if we as believers want to have the upper hand morally and ethically, this is where we have to pray. Number one, yes, the hostages get released, but number two, for Hamas to lay down their arms, and most especially number three, for everyone involved to profess faith in the God of Israel and his Messiah, Yeshua. Now, I believe that Israel is in a very tough situation. They've been in this tough situation since the October the 7th attacks. Like anyone in political leadership, we know that Prime Minister Netanyahu, his different cabinet ministers, military leaders, they want to see this thing over as quickly as possible. Anyone in war who has to go to war wants it over as quickly as possible. And those are the things we need to be praying for, that Israel can get the job done they need to as quickly as humanly possible, that Hamas can be completely neutralized and the rebuilding can begin. And how is that playing into the end time scenario? It's hard to see all the details right now, but a lot of speculation for certain. Okay, and then finally, and this is also from open source intel, a phone call from Gaza. And this shows you that perhaps on the side of those in Gaza, there's not some uniformity of all the people who are involved in this. A phone call from Gaza. The people who opened fire were Hamas terrorists. They're trying to sabotage the aid plan because they want the supplies for themselves. They've completely lost control. So here you have food, medical supplies are being sent into Gaza. Hamas is hoarding them for themselves. They're not giving them to the people who they are actually intended for. And of course, the news changes from day to day, but we have a responsibility, just as with matters of theology, which can be controversial. People have some strong opinions about them, with the news, to stay up to date. And unfortunately, although there are many, many exceptions, but I run into far too many Messianic people who they prefer to be isolated. They prefer to not pay attention to what goes on, whether it's matters of society, theology, contemporary living, or what's happening in the world, even in the land of Israel. So we continue to pray for peace. We continue to pray for sanity and for the Lord's will to prevail. And we know that in the end, he wins. But we also know that in the meantime, we have a responsibility as God's people to make a difference, to help those on the journey of faith, and to see that as many people as can be saved are saved, because there are billions who, if they do not make a profession of faith in Yeshua, Jesus as Savior, they will be experiencing a Messiah-less eternity. And that is the work of apologetics, among other things it does. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you. Shalom, and take care.